Greetings, brave souls, and welcome to the shadowed corridors of Nocturnal Nightmares TV, where the rain doesn't just fall, it listens. Tonight, we're unraveling tales so chilling, even the thunder hesitates to roar. As the storm murmurs secrets, we'll venture into true horrors that squirm in the dark corners of reality. If your spine tingles, pledge your courage. Smash subscribe and let the algorithm know you dare to linger here. Drop a drop of blood in the comments if you're watching from a place the night has already claimed. Your support fuels our descent into the abyss. Now, steady your pulse, lock your screen's glow, and let the whispers of these stories crawl into your ears. The darkness is listening. Are you? We found the devil's phone number. The flickering fluorescent light of the 24-hour diner cast a sickly pallor over our faces. It was 3:17 a.m., that dead zone where exhaustion and caffeine wage a losing battle against terrible ideas. Me, Alex, the one usually roped into these things by a morbid sense of curiosity I couldn't quite shake. Dennis is the instigator, a connoisseur of urban legends and bad decisions. Kayla, his long-suffering girlfriend, enabled his nonsense more often than not. Luis, the pragmatist, always tried to inject a dose of reality that rarely took. Torai was an adrenaline junkie who thrived on anything that promised a thrill. Felix, quiet and observant, collected strange facts like other people collected stamps. And Marnie, the true believer, convinced that the veil between worlds was thinnest in these ungodly hours. The catalyst for our latest descent into questionable choices was scrawled in thick, black marker on the grimy wall of the diner's restroom, just above a crude drawing of something vaguely demonic. For a good time or a bad one, call 666 Dev LXX. The last two digits were smudged and illegible. Dude, no way, Dennis had crowed, snapping a picture with his phone. This is classic. We have to try it. It's probably a prank line, Dennis? Louis sighed, stirring his lukewarm coffee. Or some poor schmuck who's going to get a lot of crank calls. But what if it's not? Marnie breathed, her eyes wide. What if it's real? Felix, naturally, had already been tapping away on his phone. The prefix 666 isn't actively used for geographic area codes in North America. However, some vanity numbers can be routed. Interesting. Torai just grinned, a glint of excitement in her eyes. Come on. What's the worst that could happen? Famous last words. The smudged digits became a point of intense debate. We tried combinations. Each failed call met with a mixture of relief and disappointment. Then, Dennis, in a moment of what he later called inspired genius, and I called random button mashing, punched in 666-338 for 599, Devil XX becoming 338-4599, with XX as 99. He pressed the dial. The phone rang. Once, twice. On the third ring, someone picked up. Silence. A heavy, static-filled silence that seemed to suck the air out of the diner booth. Hello, Dennis whispered, his bravado faltering. A voice answered. It wasn't male or female, human or animal. It was a symphony of whispers, a chorus of rustling leaves and cracking ice, of distant screams and mocking laughter, all coalesced into a single, chillingly articulate sound. It was ancient, weary, and infinitely patient. You called? It rasped, the sound seeming to come from inside our heads rather than through the phone's tiny speaker. A collective shiver ran down our spines. Even Luis looked pale. Dennis, to his credit or detriment, stammered, yeah, who is this? A dry, humorless chuckle echoed through the line, a sound like bones rattling in a velvet bag. You know who this is. You dialed the number. Curiosity, is it? Or something darker? No one spoke. The air in the booth was thick with a sudden primal fear. The time, the voice continued, its tone shifting, becoming almost conversational, yet infinitely menacing, is 3:33 a.m., an auspicious hour, a good time for transactions. Transactions? Kayla squeaked, her hand gripping Dennis's arm. Every call has a price, little moths. You've fluttered close to a flame that consumes. And now, you've caught my attention. The line went dead. Dennis stared at his phone, his face ashen. Holy! Hang up! Hang up! Tori hissed, even though the call was already disconnected. We sat in stunned silence for a long moment. The Greasy Spoon diner suddenly felt like a confessional, the flickering fluorescent light a harsh interrogator. Okay, that was officially the creepiest thing I've ever experienced, Felix admitted, his usual composure gone. It was just a recording, right? Luis said, though his voice lacked conviction. An elaborate, creepy recording. Marnie was shaking her head, her eyes wide with terror. No, that was real. I felt it. We paid our bill, the greasy food suddenly unappetizing, and stumbled out into the pre-dawn gloom. The city, usually a comforting presence, felt alien, watchful. We made nervous jokes, trying to dispel the oppressive atmosphere. But the voice lingered in our minds, its chilling cadence, its impossible nature. The first call back came later that day. Marnie was at home, trying to distract herself with a book. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. We only found out later, from a frantic, tearful voicemail she left on Dennis's phone before her line went dead. It's him, she'd sobbed. He called. He said my name. He knew things no one could know. He said my time was up, that the debt was due. Her voice dissolved into terrified sobs, then a choked scream, then silence. When we rushed to her apartment, it was empty. No sign of struggle, no note, just her phone lying on the floor, screen dark, and the faint, lingering scent of brimstone. Marnie was gone. Panic set in. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a recording. That voice, that thing was real, and it was coming for us. We huddled together at my apartment, a fortress of fear. We turned off our phones and unplugged the landline. But we knew with a sickening certainty that it wouldn't matter. The next night, at precisely 3:33 a.m., my old, disconnected rotary phone, a vintage piece I kept for decoration, began to ring. The sound was jarring, metallic, impossibly loud in the terrified silence of the room. We stared at it, horrified. It rang again, and again. Felix, his face a mask of grim fascination, slowly reached for it. Don't, Tori cried, grabbing his arm. We have to know, Felix whispered, his eyes fixed on the ringing phone. He lifted the receiver. The voice was there, colder now, more impatient. Felix, your curiosity has led you here. Commendable trait, but all knowledge has a price. Felix didn't speak. He just listened, his face growing paler, his eyes widening in dawning horror. He made a small, choked sound. Then he slowly, deliberately, hung up the phone. He looked at us, his expression unreadable. It offered me a deal. A deal for what? Dennis demanded. My soul for knowledge, unlimited knowledge, the secrets of the universe. Felix's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. And what did you say? I asked, my heart pounding. A strange, almost beatific smile touched Felix's lips. I accepted. Before we could react, he began to change. His eyes glowed with an unnatural, internal light. His skin seemed to stretch, to become translucent. Ancient symbols, like the ones from Rami's occult books, flickered across his form. He was becoming something else, something not human. Then, with a soft sigh, he dissolved into motes of light, which swirled for a moment before winking out of existence. Felix was gone, and the rotary phone was silent. 5 of us left. The fear was a constant, gnawing presence. We were trapped, hunted by something ancient and implacable. Tori, ever the adrenaline junkie, couldn't take the waiting. I'm not going to just sit here and let it pick us off, she declared, her eyes blazing with a reckless fire. I'm going to fight it. How do you fight a voice on the phone? How do you fight something that can reach across dimensions, that knows your deepest secrets? That night, at 3:33 a.m., Tori's smartwatch, which she deliberately left on, lit up. Unknown caller. She answered it, a defiant glare on her face. We couldn't hear the voice this time, only Tori's side of the conversation. "Yeah, it's me. What do you want, you disembodied creep?" Pause. "My soul? You can try and take it." Pause. A harsh laugh. "You think you can scare me? I've faced worse." Her bravado was admirable, but her face was growing paler, a sheen of sweat on her brow. The hand holding the smartwatch was trembling. Then her eyes widened in sudden, abject terror. Her body seized. She let out a single, choked gasp and crumpled to the floor, her smartwatch clattering beside her. Her eyes were open, staring, but empty, lifeless, her soul snatched. Tori was gone. Dennis, Kayla, Luis, and me. The apartment felt like a mausoleum. The silence between the witching hours was almost worse than the calls themselves. Dennis was a wreck, consumed by guilt. "This is all my fault," he kept muttering, pacing a worn track in my living room carpet. "I made that call. I doomed us." Kayla tried to comfort him, but her own fear was palpable. Luis, the pragmatist, was desperately trying to find a logical loophole, a way out of this supernatural contract, but his usual confidence was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed despair. The next 3:33 a.m., it was Luis's burner phone, one he'd bought specifically in a futile attempt to evade the calls, that rang. He answered it with a grim resignation. He listened for a long moment, his face impassive. Then he spoke, his voice surprisingly calm. "No, I won't make a deal. I won't give you anything." He paused. "Do your worst." He ended the call. We waited, bracing ourselves. Nothing happened. For a blissful, insane moment, we thought maybe, just maybe, he'd defied it. Then, Luis clutched his chest, his eyes wide with sudden agony. He gasped, a racking cough tearing from his lungs. Dark, viscous blood sprayed from his lips, splattering the floor. He collapsed, his body convulsing, then went still. No light, no dramatic disappearance, just a brutal physical end. Luis was gone. Dennis, Kayla, and me. The weight of our impending doom was crushing. Dennis was inconsolable. Kayla clung to him, her own terror a silent scream. The next 3:33 a.m., both their phones rang simultaneously. Two unknown numbers. They looked at each other, a shared, terrible understanding in their eyes. They answered at the same time. I watched, helpless, as their faces contorted in fear, then in a strange, almost peaceful resignation. They reached for each other's hands, their fingers intertwining. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They simply faded. Their forms grew indistinct and transparent, like old photographs exposed to too much light. Their grip on each other's hands remained until the very end. Then they were gone, leaving me alone in the silent, haunted apartment. It's 3:31 a.m. now. My phone lies on the table beside me. I haven't slept in days. The silence is a torment. I know it's coming for me. The final call, the final transaction. There's no escape. No deals to be made, not anymore. I have nothing left to offer but the tattered remnants of my fear. The restroom wall in that diner, was it a trap? A warning? A dark joke played by something ancient and boring? It doesn't matter now. We dialed the number. We invited it in. We sealed our own fates with a foolish dare and a moment of reckless curiosity. My phone screen lights up. Unknown caller. The time is 3:33 a.m. The voice is already whispering in my head. Patient. Inevitable. Alex, it's time to pay your due. I pick up the phone. What else is there to do? The flame always consumes the moths that fly too close. And our souls, well, they were just kindling. We found the devil's phone number. The flickering fluorescent light of the 24-hour diner cast a sickly pallor over our faces. It was 3:17 a.m., that dead zone where exhaustion and caffeine wage a losing battle against terrible ideas. Me, Alex, the one usually roped into these things by a morbid sense of curiosity I couldn't quite shake. Dennis is the instigator, a connoisseur of urban legends and bad decisions. Kayla, his long-suffering girlfriend, enabled his nonsense more often than not. Luis, the pragmatist, always tried to inject a dose of reality that rarely took. Torai was an adrenaline junkie who thrived on anything that promised a thrill. Felix, quiet and observant, collected strange facts like other people collected stamps. And Marnie, the true believer, convinced that the veil between worlds was thinnest in these ungodly hours. The catalyst for our latest descent into questionable choices was scrawled in thick, black marker on the grimy wall of the diner's restroom, just above a crude drawing of something vaguely demonic. For a good time or a bad one, call 666 Dev LXX. The last 2 digits were smudged and illegible. Dude, no way, Dennis had crowed, snapping a picture with his phone. This is classic. We have to try it. It's probably a prank line, Dennis? Louis sighed, stirring his lukewarm coffee. Or some poor schmuck who's going to get a lot of crank calls. But what if it's not? Marnie breathed, her eyes wide. What if it's real? Felix, naturally, had already been tapping away on his phone. The prefix 666 isn't actively used for geographic area codes in North America. However, some vanity numbers can be routed. Interesting. Torai just grinned, a glint of excitement in her eyes. Come on. What's the worst that could happen? Famous last words. The smudged digits became a point of intense debate. We tried combinations. Each failed call met with a mixture of relief and disappointment. Then, Dennis, in a moment of what he later called inspired genius, and I called random button mashing, punched in 666-338 for 599, Devil XX becoming 338-4599 with XX as 99. He pressed the dial. The phone rang. Once, twice. On the 3rd ring, someone picked up. Silence. A heavy, static-filled silence that seemed to suck the air out of the diner booth. Hello, Dennis whispered, his bravado faltering. A voice answered. It wasn't male or female, human or animal. It was a symphony of whispers, a chorus of rustling leaves and cracking ice, of distant screams and mocking laughter, all coalesced into a single, chillingly articulate sound. It was ancient, weary, and infinitely patient. You called? It rasped, the sound seeming to come from inside our heads rather than through the phone's tiny speaker. A collective shiver ran down our spines. Even Luis looked pale. Dennis, to his credit or detriment, stammered, yeah, who is this? A dry, humorless chuckle echoed through the line, a sound like bones rattling in a velvet bag. You know who this is. You dialed the number. Curiosity, is it? Or something darker? No one spoke. The air in the booth was thick with a sudden primal fear. The time, the voice continued, its tone shifting, becoming almost conversational, yet infinitely menacing, is 3:33 a.m., an auspicious hour, a good time for transactions. Transactions? Kayla squeaked, her hand gripping Dennis's arm. Every call has a price, little moths. You've fluttered close to a flame that consumes. And now, you've caught my attention. The line went dead. Dennis stared at his phone, his face ashen. Holy, hang up, hang up, Torai hissed, even though the call was already disconnected. We sat in stunned silence for a long moment. The Greasy Spoon diner suddenly felt like a confessional, the flickering fluorescent light a harsh interrogator. Okay, that was officially the creepiest thing I've ever experienced, Felix admitted, his usual composure gone. It was just a recording, right? Luis said, though his voice lacked conviction. An elaborate, creepy recording. Marnie was shaking her head, her eyes wide with terror. No, that was real. I felt it. We paid our bill, the greasy food suddenly unappetizing, and stumbled out into the pre-dawn gloom. The city, usually a comforting presence, felt alien, watchful. We made nervous jokes, trying to dispel the oppressive atmosphere, but the voice lingered in our minds, its chilling cadence, its impossible nature. The first call back came later that day. Marnie was at home, trying to distract herself with a book. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. We only found out later. from a frantic, tearful voicemail she left on Dennis's phone before her line went dead. "It's him," she'd sobbed. "He called. He said my name. He knew things no one could know. He said my time was up, that the debt was due." Her voice dissolved into terrified sobs, then a choked scream, then silence. When we rushed to her apartment, it was empty. No sign of struggle, no note, just her phone lying on the floor, screen dark, and the faint, lingering scent of brimstone. Marnie was gone. Panic set in. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a recording. That voice, that thing was real, and it was coming for us. We huddled together at my apartment, a fortress of fear. We turned off our phones and unplugged the landline. But we knew with a sickening certainty that it wouldn't matter. The next night, at precisely 3:33 a.m., my old, disconnected rotary phone, a vintage piece I kept for decoration, began to ring. The sound was jarring, metallic, impossibly loud in the terrified silence of the room. We stared at it, horrified. It rang again and again. Felix, his face a mask of grim fascination, slowly reached for it. "Don't!" Torai cried, grabbing his arm. "We have to know," Felix whispered, his eyes fixed on the ringing phone. He lifted the receiver. The voice was there, colder now, more impatient. "Felix, your curiosity has led you here. Commendable trait, but all knowledge has a price." Felix didn't speak. He just listened, his face growing paler, his eyes widening in dawning horror. He made a small, choked sound. Then he slowly, deliberately, hung up the phone. He looked at us, his expression unreadable. It offered me a deal. A deal for what? Dennis demanded. My soul for knowledge. Unlimited knowledge. The secrets of the universe. Felix's voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "And what did you say?" I asked, my heart pounding. A strange, almost beatific smile touched Felix's lips. I accepted. Before we could react, he began to change. His eyes glowed with an unnatural, internal light. His skin seemed to stretch, to become translucent. Ancient symbols, like the ones from Rami's occult books, flickered across his form. He was becoming something else, something not human. Then, with a soft sigh, he dissolved into motes of light, which swirled for a moment before winking out of existence. Felix was gone, and the rotary phone was silent. 5 of us left. The fear was a constant, gnawing presence. We were trapped, hunted by something ancient and implacable. Torai, ever the adrenaline junkie, couldn't take the waiting. "I'm not going to just sit here and let it pick us off," she declared, her eyes blazing with a reckless fire. "I'm going to fight it." How do you fight a voice on the phone? How do you fight something that can reach across dimensions, that knows your deepest secrets? That night, at 3:33 a.m., Tori's smartwatch, which she deliberately left on, lit up. Unknown caller. She answered it, a defiant glare on her face. We couldn't hear the voice this time, only Tori's side of the conversation. "Yeah, it's me. What do you want, you disembodied creep?" Pause. "My soul? You can try and take it." Pause. A harsh laugh. "You think you can scare me?" I faced worse. Her bravado was admirable, but her face was growing paler, a sheen of sweat on her brow. The hand holding the smartwatch was trembling. Then her eyes widened in sudden, abject terror. Her body seized. She let out a single, choked gasp and crumpled to the floor, her smartwatch clattering beside her. Her eyes were open, staring, but empty, lifeless, her soul snatched. Torai was gone. Dennis, Kayla, Luis, and me. The apartment felt like a mausoleum. The silence between the witching hours was almost worse than the calls themselves. Dennis was a wreck, consumed by guilt. "This is all my fault," he kept muttering, pacing a worn track in my living room carpet. "I made that call. I doomed us." Kayla tried to comfort him, but her own fear was palpable. Luis, the pragmatist, was desperately trying to find a logical loophole. a way out of this supernatural contract. But his usual confidence was gone, replaced by a hollow-eyed despair. The next 3:33 a.m., it was Luis's burner phone, one he'd bought specifically in a futile attempt to evade the calls, that rang. He answered it with a grim resignation. He listened for a long moment, his face impassive. Then he spoke, his voice surprisingly calm. "No, I won't make a deal. I won't give you anything." He paused. "Do your worst." He ended the call. We waited, bracing ourselves. Nothing happened. For a blissful, insane moment, we thought maybe, just maybe, he'd defied it. Then, Luis clutched his chest, his eyes wide with sudden agony. He gasped, a racking cough tearing from his lungs. Dark, viscous blood sprayed from his lips, splattering the floor. He collapsed, his body convulsing, then went still. No light, no dramatic disappearance, just a brutal physical end. Luis was gone. Dennis, Kayla, and me. The weight of our impending doom was crushing. Dennis was inconsolable. Kayla clung to him, her own terror a silent scream. The next 3:33 a.m., both their phones rang simultaneously. Two unknown numbers. They looked at each other, a shared, terrible understanding in their eyes. They answered at the same time. I watched, helpless, as their faces contorted in fear, then in a strange, almost peaceful resignation. They reached for each other's hands, their fingers intertwining. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They simply faded. Their forms grew indistinct and transparent, like old photographs exposed to too much light. Their grip on each other's hands remained until the very end. Then they were gone, leaving me alone in the silent, haunted apartment. It's 3:31 a.m. now. My phone lies on the table beside me. I haven't slept in days. The silence is a torment. I know it's coming for me. The final call, the final transaction. There's no escape, no deals to be made, not anymore. I have nothing left to offer but the tattered remnants of my fear. The restroom wall in that diner, was it a trap? A warning? A dark joke played by something ancient and boring? It doesn't matter now. We dialed the number. We invited it in. We sealed our own fates with a foolish dare and a moment of reckless curiosity. My phone screen lights up. Unknown caller. The time is 3:33 a.m. The voice is already whispering in my head. Patient. Inevitable. Alex, it's time to pay your due. I pick up the phone. What else is there to do? The flame always consumes the moths that fly too close. And our souls, well, they were just kindling. The thing in locker 313. Northwood High was a sprawling monument to institutional beige, and locker 313 was its grimy, whispered legend. Tucked away at the end of a dimly lit, rarely used corridor in the old wing, it hadn't been opened in decades. Rumors clung to it like cobwebs. A student who vanished, a janitor who went mad, a strange, metallic smell that sometimes emanated from its rusted vents. Most kids avoided it. We, of course, were not most kids. Me, Leo, the one who usually documented our ill-advised adventures with a perpetually recording phone. Sean, the ringleader, is fueled by an unshakable belief in his own invincibility. Amy, his fiercely loyal girlfriend, matched his bravado stride for stride. Dexter, the resident tech geek, is always ready with a lock-picking kit or a rational explanation that usually turns out to be wrong. Keeley was quiet and observant, with an uncanny knack for sensing when things were about to go sideways. Roman, the gentle giant, easily spooked but too loyal to back out. And Jen, the skeptic, who insisted it was all just an urban legend, but whose eyes held a flicker of morbid curiosity. The dare was inevitable, fueled by a potent combination of late-night pizza and teenage boredom. $100 to whoever opens locker 313, Sean had declared, his grin wide and challenging. And so, under the flickering fluorescent lights of a deserted Saturday detention, a sentence we'd cleverly engineered for this very purpose, we found ourselves standing before the infamous locker. It was dented, scratched, and coated in a patina of grime that spoke of years of neglect. A heavy, old-fashioned padlock secured its handle. The metallic smell was faint today, but there a coppery, almost bloody tang mixed with something else. Something acrid, like burnt plastic. "Right, Dex, you're up," Sean said, nudging him forward. Dexter, surprisingly pale, fumbled with his lock-picking tools. "This thing is ancient. Could take a while." Keely shivered, rubbing her arms. "I don't like this. Feels wrong." "Relax, Keel," Jen said, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "It's just an old locker." The tumblers clicked, one by one, agonizingly slowly. The only other sound was Roman's nervous breathing and the hum of the ancient ventilation system. Then, with a final, decisive clunk, the padlock sprang open. A collective intake of breath. Sean, never one to hesitate, reached for the handle. He pulled. The rusted hinges groaned in protest, a sound like a dying animal. The locker door creaked open, revealing nothing, just an empty, dusty metal box. A few faded stickers on the inside of the door, a forgotten band, a cartoon character, a faint, cobweb-draped stain on the back wall. "Well, that was anticlimactic," Jen said, a nervous laugh escaping her. Sean peered inside, then shrugged. "Guess the rumors were just rumors. Pay up, losers." As he turned away, a faint sound emanated from the depths of the locker. A soft, wet, sighing sound, like air is slowly released from a punctured lung. We froze. "Did you hear that?" Amy whispered, clutching Sean's arm. Before anyone could answer, a tendril of something dark and viscous, like congealed oil, snaked out from the back of the locker. It moved with an unnatural, deliberate slowness, exploring the dusty metal shelf. Then, another tendril followed, thicker this time, tipped with what looked like a single, unblinking, milky white eye. Roman let out a choked gasp. The thing, for there was no other word for it, began to unfurl itself from the shadows. It was amorphous, a shifting mass of greasy blackness, its surface glistening wetly in the dim light. It had no discernible shape, yet it exuded an undeniable sense of ancient, malevolent intelligence. The metallic, bloody smell intensified, becoming almost overpowering. It made another sound, a soft, clicking, chittering noise that seemed to vibrate in our bones. Then it lunged, not with speed, but with a horrifying, inexorable purpose. A pseudopod of black goo shot out, wrapping around Jen's ankle. Jen screamed, a raw, piercing sound of pure terror. She stumbled back, trying to pull away, but the tendril held fast, tightening its grip. "Help me!" she shrieked. Sean and Roman rushed forward, trying to pry the tendril off, but it was like trying to grip smoke. Their hands passed right through it, yet its hold on Jen remained. The black goo seemed to burn where it touched, Jen's skin reddening and blistering. The thing in the locker began to pull, slowly, relentlessly, dragging Jen towards the open maw of 313. Her fingernails scrabbled for purchase on the grimy linoleum floor. It's pulling her in," Dexter yelled, his face a mask of horror. With a final, sickening lurch, Jen was yanked off her feet. Her screams were abruptly cut short as she was drawn into the darkness of the locker. The door slammed shut with a resonant clang, the padlock snapping back into place as if by an unseen hand. Silence. Then, from behind the closed locker door, came a single, wet, tearing sound, and Jen was gone. The locker stood silent, innocuous as if nothing had happened. But the coppery smell was stronger now, thick and cloying, and a thin trickle of something dark and viscous seeped from beneath its door. We ran. Blind, panicked flight. We didn't stop until we were out of the old wing, out of the school, gasping for breath in the relative sanity of the late afternoon sun. The explanations we offered each other were frantic and disjointed. A prank? A hidden mechanism? But Jen was gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her parents, when we finally, numbly, called them with a vague story about her wandering off, were frantic. No one believed us, of course. A missing girl, yes. A monster in a locker? Preposterous. The police searched the school, including locker 313. They found it empty, clean even, No sign of Jen, no sign of the black goo, no strange smells, as if it had wiped itself clean. But we knew. The next few days were a living nightmare. We were haunted by what we'd seen, by Jen's screams, by the wet, tearing sound. Sleep offered no escape, only replays of that horrifying moment. Then it started coming for us. It began with whispers, faint, sibilant voices just at the edge of hearing, calling our names. Shadows that moved in the periphery of our vision. The faint, persistent smell of copper and burnt plastic. Keely was the first to truly break. She claimed to see it in her reflection, a dark shape coalescing behind her. She started barricading herself in her room. One evening, Amy was home alone. She called Sean, her voice tight with panic. "It's here, Sean. I can smell it. It's in the vents." Sean raced to her house, me and Dexter close behind. We found her front door ajar. The house was silent, eerily silent. The metallic smell was overpowering. Amy was gone. Her bedroom window was open. On the windowsill, a single greasy black tendril mark, like a slug trail, led out into the night. The whispers grew louder for the rest of us. The shadows are bolder. Roman started seeing locker 313 everywhere, in his closet, in the reflection of his TV screen, in the shadows under his bed. He swore he could hear the hinges creaking, the padlock clicking open. One morning, he didn't show up for our hushed, terrified meeting at the local diner. His parents reported him missing. His bedroom window, too, was open, a faint, dark smear on the sill. We were down to 4, Sean, Dexter, Keely, and me. The fear was a constant companion, a cold hand gripping our hearts. We knew it was picking us off one by one. But how? Why? Dexter, ever the pragmatist, tried to find a pattern. It's like it's hunting, but it's not physical, not entirely. It gets in your head first. He was right. The psychological torment was almost worse than the physical threat. The constant anticipation, the feeling of being watched, the creeping dread that eroded our sanity. Keely was next. She called me, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. "Leo, it's in my locker, my school locker. I can hear it breathing." We raced to the school, Sean using his father's spare keys to get us in after hours. The hallways were dark, silent, and imbued with a new menace. Keely's locker was closed, locked, but the metallic smell was strong, emanating from its vents, and we could hear it, a faint, wet, sighing sound. Sean, his face a mask of grim determination, tried the combination. It wouldn't open. Then, the locker door bulged outwards, as if something immense was pressing against it from within. The metal groaned, then ripped open with a screech of tearing steel. For a horrifying instant, we saw Keely's face, pale and terrified, her eyes wide with unspeakable horror, pressed against the twisted metal. Then, she was pulled back into the darkness within, her scream swallowed by a chorus of wet, chittering clicks. The locker snapped shut, the torn metal somehow reforming, sealing itself. Keely was gone. Sean, Dexter, and me. We were the last. We didn't sleep. We didn't eat. We just waited. Sean was convinced it was tied to the school, to locker 313. "We have to go back," he said, his voice hoarse. "We have to confront it. Destroy it." "Destroy what, Sean?" Dexter asked, his voice trembling. "We don't even know what it is." But Sean was resolute. It was a suicide mission, we all knew it, but the alternative, waiting to be picked off, to live in constant terror, was unbearable. We armed ourselves with whatever we could find: a baseball bat, a crowbar, a can of pepper spray that felt laughably inadequate. We returned to Northwood High, to the dimly lit corridor, to locker 313. It looked exactly as it had before, dented and unassuming. But the air around it was thick with its presence, the metallic smell so strong it made our eyes water. "Open it," Sean said, his voice a low growl. Dexter, his hands shaking, fumbled with the padlock. It sprang open. Sean yanked the door open. This time it wasn't empty. The locker was a pulsating mass of the black, viscous substance, a swirling vortex of shadows and milky white eyes. It filled the entire space, pressing against the metal walls, a low, guttural thrumming sound emanating from its depths. And in the center of the mass, we saw them. Jen, Amy, Roman, Keely. Not their bodies, but their essences. Pale, translucent figures, their faces frozen in expressions of eternal terror, trapped within the churning blackness, their faint whimpers a chorus of despair. The thing let out a sound that was almost a sigh of satisfaction. It was feeding on them, on their fear, their life force. "No!" Dexter whispered, backing away. But Sean charged, screaming a wordless cry of rage and grief, swinging the baseball bat. The bat connected with the black mass, but it was like hitting the water. The substance simply parted, then reformed, a tendril lashing out, wrapping around Sean's arm. He cried out in pain as the goo burned his skin. He was being pulled in just like Jen. Dexter, abandoning all pretense of reason, sprayed the pepper spray directly into the swirling mass. The thing recoiled, a high-pitched shriek tearing through the air, a sound that was both physical and psychic. The blackness churned violently, the trapped figures flickering. The tendril around Sean's arm loosened for a split second. It was enough. I grabbed Sean, pulling him back with all my strength. We stumbled away from the locker. The thing was thrashing now, the locker shaking violently, the metal groaning and buckling. The milky white eyes spun wildly. Then, with a sound like a massive implosion, the locker seemed to collapse in on itself. The blackness receded, drawn back into an unseen depth, the trapped figures vanishing with it. Silence. Locker 313 was still there, but it was different. It was warped and buckled, its door hanging crookedly on one hinge. The metallic smell was gone. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted. Sean was clutching his arm, his skin red and blistered, but he was alive. Dexter was gasping for breath, his face pale but resolute. We had survived. But Jen, Amy, Roman, Keely, they were gone, trapped, consumed. We never spoke of what happened. Who would believe us? We carried the secret, the trauma, the guilt. Locker 313 was eventually removed and replaced by a blank panel of metal. But sometimes, when I walk past that spot in the old wing, I can still feel a faint chill in the air. I can almost hear the creak of rusted hinges and the click of a padlock. And I know, with a certainty that will haunt me for the rest of my days, that the thing in Locker 313 isn't truly gone. It's just waiting for someone else to be curious, to be daring, to ignore the whispers and open the door. Because some doors are best left unopened, and some legends are all too real. The sound beneath the school. Saturday detention at Northwood High was a special kind of purgatory. The fluorescent lights hummed a monotonous dirge. The clock on the wall seemed to tick backward, and the silence was broken only by the occasional sigh or the scratch of a pen on paper. Ms. Bailey, our long-suffering English teacher, presided over the handful of us miscreants with an air of weary resignation. There was me, Finn, a budding filmmaker whose artistic interpretation of a history project had landed me here. Rick, the resident jock, whose temper had once again gotten the better of him. Tanya, sharp-tongued and perpetually bored, had mouthed off to the principal one too many times. Steve, a gentle giant more interested in comic books than calculus, who'd been caught borrowing lab equipment. Ali, quiet and observant, who'd aced a test a little too well, sparking accusations of cheating. And Marcus, the class clown, whose ill-timed prank involving a fire alarm had backfired spectacularly. We were an hour into our sentence, the boredom reaching critical mass, when we first heard it. A faint, rhythmic scratching, coming from below. "Did you guys hear that?" Rick asked, looking up from carving his initials into the already scarred desk. Ms. Bailey, who had been grading papers with a red pen that seemed to bleed frustration, sighed. "Probably just the ancient plumbing, Rick. This building is practically prehistoric." But the scratching came again, louder this time. A dry, rasping sound, like claws on stone. It was coming from beneath the floorboards of the detention room, which, unfortunately, was located directly above the school's rarely used labyrinthine basement. Tanya shivered. That doesn't sound like plumbing. Steve, his eyes wide, whispered, "It sounds like something trying to get out." Even Miss Bailey looked uneasy now. She set down her red pen. "All right, that's unusual." The scratching intensified, accompanied by a low, guttural rumble that vibrated through the floor, making the dusty trophies in the nearby display case rattle. "Okay, I'm officially freaked out," Ollie said, her usual composure gone. Marcus, ever the instigator, grinned nervously. "Detention just got interesting. Who wants to go exploring?" "Not Marcus," Miss Bailey said, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. "We are staying right here." But the sound was insistent, almost hypnotic. A scratching, a scraping, a deep, resonant thrumming that seemed to call to something primal within us. Then, a section of the floorboards in the corner of the room, near an old, disused storage closet, began to splinter. Dust puffed up. The scratching was deafening now, directly beneath us. With a final violent crack, a jagged hole appeared in the floor, revealing a glimpse of the dark, cobweb-choked basement below. And from that hole, a gust of air puffed up, cold and smelling of damp earth, decay, and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like old blood. The scratching stopped. An eerie silence descended, broken only by our ragged breaths. "What in the—" Miss Bailey breathed, staring at the hole. Rick, ever impulsive, was already on his feet. "I'm checking it out." "Rick, no," Tanya hissed, but he ignored her, cautiously approaching the hole. He peered down. "Anything?" Steve asked, his voice a squeak. Rick shook his head. "Just darkness. Smells like a crypt, though." He nudged a loose piece of floorboard with his foot. It tumbled into the blackness with a soft thud. For a moment, nothing. Then, a sound from below. A soft, wet, slithering sound, followed by a low, guttural click, like a giant insect flexing its mandibles. Rick stumbled back from the hole, his face pale. There's something down there. Something big." Before anyone could react, a tendril, thick as a fire hose and covered in glistening black slime, shot up from the hole. It moved with an unnatural speed and precision, whipping through the air. Ollie screamed. The tendril wrapped around Rick's ankle, yanking him off his feet. He cried out, scrabbling for purchase on the floor, but the tendril was immensely strong. It began to drag him, slowly, relentlessly, towards the gaping maw on the floor. "Help him!" Miss Bailey yelled, rushing forward and grabbing Rick's arms. Tanya and Steve joined her, pulling with all their might. It was a horrifying tug of war. Rick was suspended over the darkness, his face a mask of terror, the tendril tightening its grip, its slimy surface seeming to burn his skin. The slithering sound from below grew louder, accompanied by a chorus of those chilling, guttural clicks. Then, with a sickening, tearing sound and a final, choked scream from Rick, the tendril yanked him free. He disappeared into the blackness. The tendril retracted, vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. The hole in the floor remained a silent, dark accusation. Rick was gone. The detention room erupted into chaos. Tanya was sobbing. Steve was hyperventilating. Ollie was staring at the hole, her eyes wide with catatonic horror. Marcus, for once, was speechless, his face ashen. Miss Bailey, though visibly shaken, tried to regain control. "Okay, everyone, stay calm. We need to get out of here. Call the police." She fumbled for her phone. No signal. Of course, the old wing of Northwood High was a notorious dead zone. The landline in the detention room was, predictably, dead. "The main office," she declared, her voice trembling but firm. "There's a phone there. We go together. Stick close." We scrambled out of the detention room, leaving the gaping hole and the memory of Rick's horrifying demise behind us. The hallways of the deserted school, usually just drab and boring, now seemed imbued with a palpable menace. Every shadow seemed to writhe. Every creak of the old building sounded like a footstep. The scratching started again. Not from the detention room this time. It was moving, following us, beneath the floors. We could hear it, a dry, rasping pursuit, keeping pace with our panicked footsteps. The guttural clicks echoed from the ventilation shafts. "It's under us," Marcus shrieked, his eyes darting wildly. "It knows where we are." We reached the main stairwell leading down to the first floor and the main office. As Miss Bailey started to descend, a section of the stairs beneath her feet groaned, then collapsed with a deafening crash. She cried out, tumbling into the darkness of the basement access point that was suddenly revealed beneath the shattered steps. "Ms. Bailey!" Ollie screamed, rushing to the edge of the newly formed abyss. We could hear her struggling, coughing in the dust. I'm okay," she called up, her voice hoarse. "But I think my leg is broken." The scratching was louder now, coming from directly beneath the broken stairwell. A chorus of those hideous clicks echoed up. "We have to get her out," Steve yelled, but before any of us could move, another slimy black tendril, even larger than the first, erupted from the darkness below. It snaked around Ms. Bailey's waist. She screamed, a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, as she was dragged down, her fingernails scrabbling uselessly at the broken concrete. The tendril and Ms. Bailey vanished into the depths. The scratching and clicking intensified for a moment, a sound of grotesque satisfaction, then faded slightly. We were 5 teenagers, trapped in a deserted school, hunted by an unseen, unimaginable horror from beneath. "The gym!" Tanya suddenly yelled, her eyes wild with a desperate idea. "The emergency exit. It leads straight outside." It was our only hope. We raced through the silent, echoing hallways, the sound of the scratching a constant, terrifying accompaniment. It was playing with us, hurting us. We burst into the cavernous gymnasium. The emergency exit, with its glowing green sign, was on the far side. Freedom. As we sprinted across the polished wooden floor, the ground beneath us began to tremble. The rhythmic thudding of our own feet was drowned out by a deep, resonant booming from below, as if something colossal was pounding on the foundations of the school. Cracks began to appear in the gym floor, racing towards us like dark lightning. "It's coming up!" Ollie shrieked. The floor directly in front of the emergency exit buckled and then exploded upwards in a shower of splintered wood and concrete dust. A massive, gaping maw, easily 10 feet across, opened in the gymnasium floor, revealing a pit of writhing, shadowy forms and countless glistening, black tendrils. The air was filled with that hideous clicking, a cacophony of alien hunger. We skidded to a halt, trapped. Marcus, in a fit of panicked desperation, tried to climb the bleachers. A tendril, lightning fast, shot out from the pit, wrapping around his leg. He screamed, a high-pitched wail of terror, as he was dragged, flailing, into the abyss. His screams were abruptly cut short. Steve, the gentle giant, finally snapped. With a roar of pure, primal fury, he grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher from the wall. "I'm not going down without a fight, you freaks!" He charged towards the pit, spraying a cloud of white foam at the writhing tendrils. For a moment, it seemed to work. The tendrils recoiled, the clicking turning into a hiss of what sounded like pain or surprise. But it was only a momentary reprieve. A dozen tendrils erupted from the pit, swarming Steve and overwhelming him. He went down fighting, his roars turning into choked gurgles as he was dragged into the darkness. The fire extinguisher clattered to the floor, still hissing faintly. Just me, Tanya, and Ollie. We were huddled together, backed against the far wall, the gaping maw in the floor separating us from our only escape. The tendrils writhed, testing the air, their slimy surfaces glistening. The clicking was softer now, almost curious. Tanya, her face streaked with tears and grime, looked at us, a strange, almost feral glint in her eyes. "It wants us," she whispered. "It woke up hungry." Ollie was muttering to herself, rocking back and forth, her eyes vacant with terror. Then the largest tendril of all, thick as a tree trunk, slowly from the center of the pit. It wasn't black and slimy like the others. This one was a pale, almost translucent white, and it pulsed with a faint internal luminescence. At its tip was not a grasping appendage, but a single, massive, milky white eye, easily the size of a basketball. The eye fixed on us. It swiveled, focusing on Ollie. Ollie stopped rocking. A strange, serene expression spread across her face. She stood up, her movements slow and deliberate, and began to walk towards the pit. "Ollie, no!" I yelled, grabbing her arm. But she was surprisingly strong, her eyes fixed on the giant luminous eye. "It's beautiful," she whispered, a blissful smile on her face. "It's calling me." She pulled her arm free and continued her slow, inexorable walk towards the edge. She didn't even hesitate as she stepped off into the darkness. She didn't scream. The giant eye then turned to Tanya. Tanya didn't wait. With a defiant scream, she charged. Not at the pit, but at the nearest set of basketball hoops. She scrambled up the padding onto the backboard, then, with a desperate leap, grabbed onto the rim, trying to swing herself towards a high window. A dozen black tendrils shot out like striking snakes. They wrapped around her, pulling her from her perch. She fought, kicking and screaming, but it was useless. She was dragged, still struggling, into the writhing mass. Her screams echoed for a moment, then were silenced. Just me, alone, trapped. The giant, luminous eye fixed on me. I could feel its intelligence, ancient and alien, probing my mind, tasting my fear. The air crackled with an unseen energy. I closed my eyes, waiting for the inevitable. The scratching, the slithering, the clicking. It was all around me now, a symphony of impending doom. But the tendrils didn't come. Instead, a voice, not a sound, but a thought, implanted directly into my mind. Cold, ancient, and filled with an unutterable hunger. "You are different. You will watch. You remember." My eyes snapped open. The giant eye was still fixed on me, its luminescence pulsing. The others, they were just sustenance. But you will be the witness. A wave of nausea washed over me. The meaning was horrifyingly clear. It wasn't going to kill me. Not yet. It wanted me to see, to remember, to spread the story, to lure others. "Go!" the thought voice commanded. "Tell them what slumbers beneath. Tell them we are awake." The tendrils around the pit slowly retracted. The gaping maw remained, but the writhing shadows within seemed to recede slightly. An escape route, or another part of its twisted game. I didn't question it. I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaking, and ran. I didn't look back at the pit, at the giant, luminous eye. I ran out of the gym, through the silent, empty hallways, out of the school, and into the blessed, ordinary light of day. I never went back to Northwood High. They condemned the old wing, then the entire school, citing structural instability. No bodies were ever recovered. Rick, Ms. Bailey, Marcus, Steve, Ollie, Tanya. They became another set of tragic, unexplained disappearances. But I know what slumbers beneath. I know it's awake, and I know it's still hungry. And sometimes, late at night, when the ground trembles with a distant passing truck, or a floorboard creaks in the silence, I hear it, the faint scratching, the guttural clicks, and I remember. I am the witness, and I wonder, when will it call me back to see again? The Sleepover Ritual. The air in Julie's basement was thick with the scent of stale popcorn, cheap perfume, and the electric thrill of illicit teenage adventure. It was Julie's 16th birthday sleepover, and the seven of us, me, Chloe, the quiet observer usually content to watch from the sidelines. Julie, the birthday girl, bubbly and easily excitable. Becca, bold and always pushing boundaries. Sam, sarcastic and a reluctant participant in anything woo-woo. Lila, artistic and sensitive, who claimed to feel energies. Rachel, pragmatic and level-headed, our designated skeptic. Drew, the class clown, always ready with a nervous joke. And Owen, Becca's shy, sweet boyfriend, clearly dragged along for the ride, were gathered in a circle on the worn shag carpet. The game was Becca's idea, of course. She'd found it on some obscure internet forum, nestled between dubious spells and grainy photos of alleged paranormal activity. The Midnight Summons, it was called. The instructions were simple, if unsettling. 7 participants, 7 black candles, a chalk-drawn circle, and a chant repeated 13 times at the stroke of midnight. The goal? To invite a presence from the other side. "It's just for a laugh, guys," Becca had said, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "What's the worst that could happen?" Famous last words again. Lila, despite her supposed sensitivity, had meticulously drawn the chalk circle, her brow furrowed in concentration. Julie arranged the 7 black candles, their flames casting long, dancing shadows on our faces. Drew kept cracking jokes about summoning a pizza delivery ghost. Owen looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Sam rolled her eyes but took her place in the circle. Rachel watched with an air of detached amusement, ready to debunk any supernatural occurrences. As the clock on Julie's phone ticked closer to midnight, a hush fell over the room. Even Becca seemed a little nervous now. At the stroke of 12, we began the chant, our voices a ragged, uncertain chorus. "Spirits of the night, we call to thee, cross the veil, for us to see." 13 times. The air grew colder. The candle flames seemed to dim, then flare erratically. A faint, almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the floorboards. On the 13th repetition, a sudden gust of wind, seemingly from nowhere, swept through the basement, extinguishing 6 of the 7 candles. Only one remained lit, its flame burning with an unnatural, unwavering intensity, casting a single, stark shadow. Collective gasp. "Whoa!" Drew whispered, his jokey demeanor gone. "Did you feel that?" Lila breathed, her eyes wide. The energy, it shifted. Then, a voice, not from any of us, echoed through the room. It was a dry, rasping whisper like autumn leaves skittering across the cold stone. "One of you has broken the pact." We stared at each other, a new, sharp fear pricking at our skin. "What pact?" Julie stammered, her voice trembling. The voice chuckled, a sound that was utterly devoid of humor, cold and ancient. "The pact of sincerity. The ritual demands truth. One of you held back. One of you cheated the offering." "Cheated?" Sam scoffed, though her voice was shaky. "What offering? It was just a stupid chant." The single candle flame flared higher, casting the speaker's shadow, long and distorted, on the wall. "The offering of intent, of belief. One of you did not truly invite. And now, the invitation cannot be rescinded. Not until the imbalance is rectified." "Rectified how?" Rachel asked, her skepticism warring with a dawning horror. The flame on the single candle suddenly leaped, elongating, twisting into a grotesque, almost humanoid shape for a fleeting second before settling back down. When it did, a thin wisp of black smoke, like a spectral finger, curled from its wick and pointed directly at Owen. Owen let out a choked cry, scrambling back. "No, I didn't do anything." Becca, protective and fierce, jumped to his side. "Leave him alone. What do you want?" The whispering voice ignored her. "The cheater has weakened the barrier, and I am hungry." The single candle flame suddenly extinguished itself, plunging the basement into near-total darkness, save for the faint glow of Julie's phone screen, which she dropped in her terror. A moment of suffocating silence. Then Owen screamed, a raw, visceral sound of pure agony, abruptly cut short. When Julie fumbled for the light switch, her hands shaking, and flooded the basement with harsh fluorescent light, Owen was gone, vanished. The chalk circle was undisturbed. The 6 extinguished candles sat in their places. The 7th, the one that had burned so intensely, was now just a cold stick of black wax. But on the carpet where Owen had been sitting, there was a dark, greasy stain, and the faint, cloying scent of something like burnt sugar and decay. Panic erupted. Julie was sobbing hysterically. Becca was screaming Owen's name, her face a mask of disbelief and grief. Sam was hyperventilating. Drew was babbling incoherently. Lila was rocking back and forth, muttering about dark energies. Rachel, for once, was speechless, her face ashen. We searched the basement, the house, the yard. Owen was nowhere. His phone went straight to voicemail. The police were called, of course. We concocted a flimsy story about Owen getting upset and running off. They were skeptical, but with no evidence of foul play, there was little they could do. But we knew what that voice had said, what that pointing flame had meant. One of us had cheated on the ritual. And now, whatever we had summoned was here, and it was taking us one by one. The next few days were a blur of fear, guilt, and paranoia. We avoided each other, yet were drawn together by a shared terror. Who had cheated? Who was responsible for Owen's disappearance? For the monstrous thing that was now undoubtedly hunting us. Suspicions darted between us like poisoned arrows. The presence made itself known in subtle, terrifying ways. Cold spots in warm rooms, whispers just at the edge of hearing calling our names. The faint, lingering scent of burnt sugar and decay. Objects moving on their own. Rachel, the pragmatist, was the next to go. She'd been trying to research the midnight summons, convinced there was a logical explanation, a way to reverse it. She called me late one night, her voice tight with a fear I'd never heard from her before. "Chloe, it's here. I can feel it. The chalk circle. It reappeared in my room. And the candle, it's lit." I told her to get out, to come to my place. But her line went dead mid-sentence. When we got to her house, her bedroom door was locked from the inside. We broke it down. The room was freezing. A perfectly drawn chalk circle dominated the floor. In its center, a single black candle burned with that same cold, intense flame. Rachel was gone. The greasy stain on her carpet was identical to the one in Julie's basement. The unspoken question, who cheated, became a venomous accusation. Becca, consumed by grief and rage, pointed fingers at everyone, her eyes wild. Sam retreated into a shell of sarcastic denial, but her trembling hands betrayed her fear. Drew's nervous jokes became increasingly manic. Lila claimed the energies were growing stronger, feeding on our fear. Julie was a wreck, blaming herself for hosting the sleepover. The entity seemed to revel in our paranoia, our fracturing bonds. Drew was taken next. He'd been seeing Owen in his dreams, beckoning him. He swore he could hear Owen's voice calling to him from dark corners. One afternoon, he simply walked out of his house, a dazed, vacant look on his face, and never came back. His parents found a single, unlit black candle on his pillow. We were four, me, Julie, Becca, and Sam. Lila had disappeared from her art studio a day after Drew. The police were now treating it as a string of related disappearances, but they were grasping at straws. They didn't know about the ritual, about the voice, about the candle. The entity grew bolder. The whispers were clearer now, filled with promises and threats. Shadows danced in the corners of our eyes. The scent of burnt sugar and decay was a constant companion. Becca became obsessed with finding out who cheated. "It has to be one of us left," she hissed, her gaze darting between us. Owen wouldn't have. Rachel wouldn't have. Drew was too scared. The single black candle, the harbinger of doom, began appearing in our homes, always unlit, always waiting. We'd throw it away, burn it, bury it. It would always reappear, pristine and menacing. One evening, it appeared on Sam's nightstand, its wick already smoking, as if about to ignite. Sam, who had been trying to maintain a facade of cynical detachment, finally broke. "I can't do this anymore," she screamed, grabbing the candle. "I'm not going to let it take me." She ran out of her house, towards the old quarry on the edge of town, the candle clutched in her hand. We chased after her, begging her to stop, but she was deaf to our pleas. We found her at the quarry's edge, staring down into the dark water. The black candle in her hand was burning now, its cold flame casting an eerie glow on her terrified face. "It told me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "It told me who cheated." "Who, Sam? Who was it?" Becca demanded, her voice raw. Sam looked at eyes filled with a terrible, dawning understanding. It doesn't matter anymore. It just wants a soul. The flame on the candle flared, and Sam stumbled, a look of surprise and agony on her face, before pitching forward into the black water. She didn't resurface. The candle, now extinguished, bobbed on the surface for a moment before sinking out of sight. Julie and Becca and me, the survivors, or so we thought. The entity was relentless. The candle reappeared. The whispers grew more insistent. Becca, driven half-mad by grief and suspicion, finally confronted Julie. "It was you, wasn't it?" she screamed, grabbing Julie's arm. "You were always jealous of me and Owen. You wanted to scare him, to break us up." Julie, pale and trembling, denied it, but the seed of doubt had been sown. Their friendship already strained, shattered. That night, the candle appeared in Julie's room, lit. Becca and I rushed over, alerted by Julie's frantic texts. We found her huddled in her closet, sobbing. The candle sat on her dresser, its blue flame burning steadily. The whispering voice filled the room, louder now, almost triumphant. "The imbalance, it festers. The lie, it calls to me. It wasn't me," Julie shrieked. "I swear, it wasn't me." The flame on the candle leaped, and a shadowy tendril snaked out, reaching for Julie. Becca, surprisingly, threw herself in front of Julie. "No, if someone cheated, it was me. I wanted to scare Owen a little, and make him more adventurous. It was me." The tendril paused. The voice chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "A confession? How noble. But the truth has its scent." The tendril bypassed Becca, then Julie, snaked towards me. My blood ran cold. "You, Chloe," the voice whispered, directly in my mind. The quiet observer, the one who held back, not from malice, but from disbelief. You didn't truly believe. You didn't truly offer your intent. Yours was the weakest link. Yours was the cheat. It was true. I hadn't believed it. I'd mouthed the words and gone through the motions, but a part of me had remained detached, skeptical, amused. I hadn't truly invited. The tendril wrapped around my ankle, cold and cloying. The scent of burnt sugar and decay filled my nostrils. Julie and Becca stared, horrified, as I was dragged towards the burning candle. "No!" Becca screamed, lunging forward, but an invisible force threw her back. The candle flame flared, consuming my vision. The last thing I saw was the terrible, dawning realization on my friends' faces. The pact had been broken, and the imbalance was finally being rectified. I don't know what happened to Julie and Becca. Did the entity leave, its hunger sated? Or did it find new reasons to stay, new imbalances to exploit? Sometimes, in the darkness where I now reside, a place filled with whispers and the scent of burnt sugar, I think I can hear them. 7 voices. Owen, Rachel, Drew, Sam, Lila, Julie, Becca. All wondering, for eternity, who truly broke the circle. But I know. It was me, the quiet observer, the one who didn't believe. And the ritual, it always demands its due, especially from the cheaters. The lights in the cornfield. The heat of late August hung heavy over Blackwood Creek, thick and cloying as molasses. We were restless, bored, and fueled by the potent cocktail of youth and cheap beer. Me, Finn, the reluctant documentarian with a cheap camcorder I rarely used. Cole, the daredevil always looking for the next thrill. Haley is sharp-witted and pragmatic, usually the voice of reason. Seth is quiet and observant, with an uncanny ability to notice things others missed. Brianna, Cole's fiery girlfriend, is never one to back down from a dare. Juno, ethereal and artistic, saw patterns in everything. And Walt, the gentle giant, is more comfortable with animals than people, but fiercely loyal. The cornfield stretched for miles behind Walt's dilapidated farmhouse, a rippling sea of green under the bruised twilight sky. It was Cole, naturally, who first spotted the lights. "Whoa, check that out," he yelled, pointing a beer bottle towards the depths of the corn. We squinted, Far off, near the shadowy tree line that bordered the far edge of the field, were lights. Not headlights, not flashlights. These were different, pulsing, shifting orbs of pale, ethereal light, like trapped fireflies the size of basketballs, dancing just above the tassels of the corn. They appeared, shimmered, then vanished, only to reappear a little further on. What in the hell is that? Brianna breathed, her bravado momentarily forgotten. Swamp gas, Haley declared, though her eyes were fixed on the phenomenon, a flicker of unease in their usual calm. Swamp gas doesn't dance. Hails? Cole retorted, already halfway to the edge of the field. Come on, let's check it out. Cole, wait, Haley called, but he was already disappearing into the rustling stalks, Brianna close behind. Juno, her eyes wide with a strange excitement, murmured, "They're calling." Seth, ever cautious, looked at Walt. "You ever seen anything like that before, Walt?" Walt, who'd grown up on this farm, just shook his head slowly, his brow furrowed. "Never. Nothing like that." The allure of the unknown, combined with a healthy dose of peer pressure and a few too many beers, proved too strong. One by one, we followed Cole and Brianna into the suffocating embrace of the cornfield. My camcorder, for once, felt like a necessary appendage, a barrier between me and whatever lay ahead. The corn towered over us, the stalks thick and close, creating a disorienting maze. The air was still, heavy, and smelled of damp earth and ripening corn. The only sounds were our ragged breaths and the constant, whispering rustle of the leaves. The lights ahead seemed to beckon, drawing us deeper. We pushed through the dense rows, the sharp leaves scratching at our skin. The lights would disappear, then reappear, always just out of reach, luring us further from the familiar lights of Walt's farmhouse. It was Seth who noticed we were no longer alone. "Guys," he whispered, his voice tight, pointing to the ground. Pressed into the soft earth between the rows were prints. Not animal, not human. They were long and slender, with 3 splayed toes ending in what looked like delicate, sharp talons. They were fresh, and they were heading in the same direction as the lights. And us, a new kind of chill, unrelated to the evening air, settled over our group. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea," Haley said, her voice barely audible. But Cole, ever intrepid, just grinned. "Don't be such a baby. It's probably just some weird birds." The lights suddenly flared, brighter now, converging in a small clearing a little way ahead. We could hear a faint, almost sub-audible humming sound emanating from that direction. We pushed through the last row of corn and stumbled into the clearing. The lights weren't orbs anymore. They were figures, tall, impossibly slender beings, their forms indistinct, shimmering as if made of heat haze or moonlight. They had no discernible features, just a radiant, internal luminescence. There were 3 of them standing motionless, watching us. The humming intensified, vibrating in our bones. We stood frozen, a mixture of awe and primal terror gripping us. My camcorder trembled in my hand. Then, as quickly as they had appeared, the figures began to fade, the light dimming, until they were nothing more than faint after-images against the darkness. The humming stopped. The clearing was empty, save for the lingering scent of ozone and the disturbed corn. And us, 7 stunned, silent teenagers. What were those things? Brianna finally choked out. No one had an answer. We stumbled back to Walt's farmhouse, the bravado completely gone, replaced by a shaken, unnerved silence. The story tumbled out in hushed, disjointed fragments. Walt listened, his weathered face grim, offering no explanations, only a deepening unease. We tried to sleep, but the image of those radiant, silent figures was burned into our minds. The rustling of the corn outside the windows sounded menacing now. The next night, it started. We were gathered in Walt's dimly lit living room, trying to distract ourselves with a crackly old movie, when Juno gasped, her hand flying to her arm. "What's wrong?" Seth asked, concerned. Juno held out her arm. A faint, pale light was emanating from her skin, just below the elbow. It wasn't a reflection. It was coming from within her, a soft, ethereal glow, exactly like the light of the figures in the cornfield. It's like them, she whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a strange, almost reverent awe. We stared, horrified. The glow intensified, spreading up her arm, and casting her face in an eerie, pale light. What's happening to her? Cole demanded, his voice tight. Before anyone could answer, a sound came from outside. A low, resonant hum, just like the one we'd heard in the clearing. And the rustling in the cornfield started. A purposeful, rhythmic swish, 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 growing closer. Walt grabbed his old hunting rifle from above the mantelpiece. Stay inside. Lock the doors. The glowing on Juno's arm became almost blinding. She cried out, a sound of pain and confusion. It hurts. Make it stop. The rustling was at the edge of the yard now. Shadows, tall and slender, moved among the corn stalks at the periphery of the porch light. Then the front door, old and weathered as it was, buckled inward with a splintering crash. Standing in the doorway were 3 of them, the light beings. They were taller than they'd seemed in the field, their forms more defined now, though still shimmering, their faces blank, featureless expanses of light. They moved with an unnerving, fluid grace, gliding into the room. The humming filled the air, so intense it made our teeth ache. They ignored us, their attention fixed solely on Juno. Juno was screaming now, clutching her glowing arm, her body convulsing. The light was consuming her, her features blurring, her form becoming indistinct. Walt raised his rifle, but one of the beings lifted a slender, radiant hand. A wave of invisible force slammed into Walt, sending him flying across the room to crash against the far wall. He slumped to the floor, unmoving. The beings converged on Juno. They didn't touch her, not physically. They simply enveloped her in their light. For a moment, there were 4 radiant figures in the room. Then Juno's screams stopped. The intense light subsided slightly, and Juno was gone, vanished. The 3 light beings stood for a moment, their luminescence a fraction brighter, then turned and glided back out into the cornfield. The humming faded, the rustling receded. We were left in the shattered remains of the living room, staring at the empty space where Juno had been, the faint scent of ozone lingering in the air. Walt groaned, stirring. The next 24 hours were a blur of terror and disbelief. We wanted to run, to get as far away from Blackwood Creek and that cursed cornfield as possible. But Walt was injured, his leg broken, and a new, horrifying realization was dawning. This wasn't over. That night it was Seth. He'd been quiet all day, withdrawn, his eyes constantly darting towards the cornfield. As dusk fell, the faint glow started on his hand. The same sequence of events played out, a horrifying, unstoppable ritual. The humming, the rustling, the arrival of the light beings. This time, Cole tried to fight. He charged at them with a heavy iron poker, screaming in rage and grief. They didn't even flinch. One of them simply extended a radiant finger, and Cole was thrown back, hitting his head hard and knocked unconscious. Seth didn't scream. He just stared at the beings, a look of profound, sorrowful understanding on his face as the light consumed him. Then he too was gone. There were 5. The farmhouse felt like a tomb. We knew the pattern. One of us would glow, and they would come. Haley, ever the pragmatist, tried to find a way out. We can't stay here. We have to get Walt to a doctor. We have to warn someone. But how? The nearest town was miles away. The truck was old and unreliable, and the thought of venturing out with those things hunting us was paralyzing. That night, the glow appeared on Brianna. She fought. Oh God, how she fought. She screamed. She cursed. She threw anything she could get her hands on. It made no difference. The light beings were implacable, their movements serene, their purpose unwavering. Cole, recovered but dazed, watched in agony as the light took his girlfriend, his roars of helpless fury swallowed by the intense humming. Brianna vanished, her final, defiant scream echoing in the sudden silence. For left, me, Cole, Haley, Walt. Fear was a living thing now, coiling in our stomachs, whispering in our ears. Sleep was impossible. Every rustle of the corn, every shadow, was a harbinger of doom. Cole was a broken man, his bravado shattered, replaced by a hollow-eyed despair. Haley, though terrified, clung to her reason, desperately trying to find a pattern, a weakness, anything. Walt, his face etched with pain and grief, just watched the cornfield, his rifle clutched in his good hand. The next night it was Walt. The glow started on his weathered cheek. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just looked at us, his eyes filled with deep sadness. "Get out of here, kids," he rasped, as the humming began its deadly symphony. "Don't let M take you all." When the light beings arrived, he met their blank, radiant gaze with a quiet dignity. He closed his eyes as the light enveloped him, and then he was gone. Cole, Haley, and me. The farmhouse was a charnel house of memories, each room stained with loss. We knew one of us was next. The unspoken question hung between us. Who? That night, as the shadows lengthened and the cicadas began their mournful song, my hand began to glow. A cold, numb dread washed over me. This was it. My turn. My camcorder lay on the table, its battery long dead. There would be no record of my end. Haley stared at my glowing hand, her face a mask of terror and a strange, fierce protectiveness. Cole just sat, head in his hands, rocking back and forth. The humming started, the rustling in the corn. "No," Haley whispered, her voice trembling but firm. "Not again. We have to do something." "What can we do, Hales?" Cole mumbled, his voice devoid of hope. "They're unstoppable." "Fire," Haley said, her eyes suddenly bright with a desperate idea. "They came from the field. They're tied to it. What if we burn it?" It was insane, reckless, a last desperate gamble. But what did we have to lose? The light beings were gliding across the yard, their luminescence cutting through the twilight. "The fuel cans in the shed," Haley yelled, already moving. "Cole, help me." Galvanized by her sudden action, Cole lurched to his feet. We raced to the shed, grabbing the dented cans of gasoline Walt used for the ancient tractor. My glowing hand was a beacon, drawing them closer. They were almost at the porch. We doused the edge of the cornfield, sloshing gasoline with shaking hands. The fumes were acrid, catching in our throats. "Now!" Haley screamed, fumbling with a lighter. The light beings were on the porch, their blank faces turned towards us, their humming a deafening throb. The lighter caught. Haley threw it. The gasoline ignited with a whoosh, a wall of fire erupting between us and the cornfield, between us and those things. The light beings recoiled. The humming faltered, turning into a discordant shriek, a sound of pain or rage. Their radiant forms flickered violently. The fire spread with terrifying speed, consuming the dry stalks, the flames leaping high into the night sky, casting a hellish orange glow. The light beings retreated, melting back into the burning corn, their forms becoming indistinct, their shrieks fading as the roar of the inferno grew. The glow on my hand flickered, then died. We stood, panting, smoke stinging our eyes, watching the cornfield burn. The heat was intense, the crackle of the flames a symphony of destruction. Did we stop them, or just anger them? We didn't wait to find out. We piled into Walt's battered truck. Cole, his hands shaking, managed to get the engine to turn over. We roared away from the farmhouse, away from the burning field, not looking back. They never found bodies. Juno, Seth, Brianna, Walt vanished. The official explanation was a tragic fire, an unfortunate accident. No one believed our fragmented, traumatized stories of lights and radiant beings. Cole and Haley drifted apart, haunted by what they'd seen, by who they'd lost. I still have nightmares. The image of those featureless, glowing faces burned into my memory. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind rustles through the trees, I think I can hear a faint, distant humming. And I wonder, the cornfield eventually grew back green and indifferent. But the locals whisper that sometimes, on clear nights, strange lights can still be seen dancing above the tassels. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to my soul, that they are still out there, waiting. And each time the lights appear, something or someone is collected. And the glow is just the beginning of the end. The seventh candle. The air in Nora's attic apartment was thick with incense and anticipation. 7 of us, a mismatched group bound by a shared curiosity for the unseen, sat around a scarred wooden table. Me, Leo, the skeptic, dragged along by my more enthusiastic friends. Eli, the self-proclaimed paranormal investigator, his pockets bulging with EMF readers and voice recorders. Nora, our host, is a romantic soul who believes in everything from ghosts to garden gnomes. Rami, quiet and intense, had inherited a dusty collection of occult books from a mysterious great-aunt. Diane, pragmatic and sharp-witted, is here mostly for the anthropological thrill. Saul, a gentle giant with a nervous laugh, was clearly out of his depth. And Kat, vibrant and impulsive, who'd suggested the seance in the first, for a bit of a laugh. 7 white candles, bought from a dollar store, stood in a circle on the table. Eli, with an air of solemn importance, lit them one by one, muttering an incantation he'd found in one of Rami's books. The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows on our faces. "We call upon the spirits that dwell beyond the veil," Eli intoned, his voice a theatrical whisper. "If there are any present, make yourselves known." For a long moment, nothing happened. Just the faint crackle of the wicks, the scent of melting wax, and Nora's patchouli. I was about to make a sarcastic comment when it happened. The 7th candle, the last one Eli had lit, sputtered. Its flame, which had been a cheerful yellow, shrank, then flared, turning a startling, vivid sapphire blue. A collective gasp went around the table. "Wow!" Kat breathed, leaning closer. "Did you see that?" Eli's eyes were wide. That's not normal." The blue flame burned steadily, an unnatural, cold light that seemed to absorb the warmth from the other candles. Cast no flickering shadows, just a constant, eerie glow. "What does it mean?" Nora whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Rami, his face pale, flipped through the brittle pages of his ancient tome. "A blue flame. It can signify a powerful entity, or a binding." "Binding to what?" Diane asked, her usual composure slightly ruffled. Before Rami could answer, a gust of wind, seemingly from nowhere, swept through the attic room, even though the windows were closed. The 6 yellow flames guttered wildly, then one by one, extinguished themselves, plunging us into the dim, unsettling light of the single blue candle. A nervous laugh escaped Saul. "Okay, that was creepy." Then the blue candle moved, not just flickered. It slid, slowly, an inch across the table, towards Kat. Kat yelped, snatching her hand back. "Did you see that? It moved. It's just a draft," I said, trying to inject some reason, though a cold knot was tightening in my own stomach. There was no draft. The air was unnervingly still. The blue candle slid another inch, its cold flame unwavering. "Okay, seance over," Diane declared, pushing her chair back. "This is officially weird." We all scrambled up, relief mixing with a burgeoning unease. Eli quickly tried to blow out the blue candle. He puffed once, twice. The flame barely flickered. He blew harder, his face turning red. The blue flame remained, serene and defiant. It won't go out," he stammered, backing away. We decided to leave the attic, a collective, unspoken agreement that whatever was happening, we wanted no part of it. As we clattered down the narrow wooden stairs, Nora glanced back. "Guys," she whispered, her voice trembling. The blue candle was at the top of the stairs, its cold light illuminating the dusty landing. It hadn't been there seconds before. It was as if it had glided silently after us. A new, sharper fear began to prickle at my skin. This wasn't a prank or a trick of the light. This was something else, something impossible, We tried to rationalize. Static electricity, a cleverly hidden mechanism. But the way it moved, silent and deliberate, defied any logical explanation. We ended up in Nora's living room, huddled together, the offending candle now sitting on her coffee table, its blue flame casting long, distorted shadows. Maybe if we just ignore it, it'll go away? Saul suggested hopefully. Suddenly, Kat gasped, clutching her chest. I can't breathe properly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with panic. Kat? What's wrong? Eli rushed to her side. She shook her head, struggling for air. It's cold, so cold. And then, the blue flame on the candle flickered. Violently, it shrank, sputtered, and with a soft thud, it went out. For a moment, there was only darkness, save for the faint glow of the city lights through the window. Then a collective, horrified intake of breath. Kat was gone. 1 second she was there, gasping for air. The next, the space she occupied was empty. No sound, no struggle, just gone, as if she'd been erased from existence. The candle, now unlit, sat innocently on the coffee table. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. It was broken by Nora's hysterical sob. Where did she go? Kat, Kat. Diane, her face ashen, was staring at the unlit candle. The flame, it went out, and she disappeared. The implication hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Panic erupted. Eli was babbling about demonic entities and soul-snatching. Rami was frantically searching his book, his hands shaking so badly he could barely turn the pages. Saul was hyperventilating. Nora was crying uncontrollably. I felt a cold dread spreading through me, a primal fear I'd never known. This was real, unbelievably, horrifyingly real. Then the candle on the coffee table relit itself, not with a spark or a match. The wick simply glowed, then burst back into that same cold, sapphire blue flame, and it moved. It slid across the coffee table towards Saul. Saul shrieked, scrambling back, knocking over a lamp. No! Get it away from me! The blue candle pursued him, gliding silently across the floor. It was like a sentient predator homing in on its prey. We have to stop it! Eli yelled, grabbing a heavy book. He hurled it at the candle. The book passed right through the flame, thudding against the wall. The candle didn't even flicker. It reached Saul, who was cowering in a corner, sobbing. It stopped a few inches from his feet, its blue flame unwavering. Saul stared at it, mesmerized, his terror replaced by a strange, dazed resignation. He reached out a trembling hand as if to touch the flame. Saul, no! Diane screamed. The blue flame flickered, shrank, went out, and Saul vanished. The space where he'd been cowering was empty. The candle, unlit, remained. There were 5. The apartment felt like a tomb. The silence was broken only by our ragged breaths and Nora's whimpering. The candle relit, blue, cold. It began to move again, this time towards Diane. Diane, however, was not one to go down without a fight. No, you don't, she snarled, grabbing a heavy glass vase. She brought it down with all her might on the candle. The vase shattered. The candle was untouched. Its blue flame burned brightly, continued its slow, relentless advance. This is insane. Diane backed away, her eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape, a weapon, anything. There has to be a way to stop it. Rami finally looked up from his book, his face a mask of despair. The incantation, it was a summoning, but also a binding. The 7th candle, it's a vessel, is tethered to us, to our life force. So how do we untether it? I demanded. I don't know, Rami whispered. The book doesn't say. It just warns against incompleteness. The candle was almost at Diane's feet. She was backed against the wall, her eyes wide with a terror that finally broke through her pragmatic facade. She looked at us, a silent, desperate plea in her eyes. The blue flame flickered, went out. Diane was gone. The candle sat on the floor, unlit. 4 of us remained. Nora, Eli, Rami, and me. The air was thick with the stench of fear and the impossible. The candle relit. This time, it moved towards Rami. Rami didn't try to run. He just stared at the approaching blue flame. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "It's my fault," he whispered. "I brought that book. I read the words." "Don't say that, Rami," Nora cried, but her voice was weak. The candle reached him. Its blue flame seemed to intensify, to pulse with a hungry light. Rami closed his eyes. The flame went out. Rami was gone. The candle unlit, waited. Nora, Eli, and me. The silence was a physical weight crushing us. The candle relit. Blue, malevolent. It hesitated for a moment as if choosing its next victim. Then it began to slide towards Nora. Nora screamed, a raw animal sound of pure terror. She scrambled back, tripping over an ottoman and falling heavily. The candle followed, relentlessly. Eli, who had been frozen in a state of shock, suddenly snapped. "No!" he roared, his voice cracking. He grabbed a kitchen knife from a block on the counter, a flimsy weapon against an intangible foe. But it was something. "I won't let you take her." He lunged at the candle, stabbing wildly at the blue flame. The knife passed through it again and again. The candle was untouched. It reached Nora, who was sobbing on the floor, curled into a fetal position. Eli threw himself between Nora and the candle, shielding her with his body. "Take me!" he screamed at the flame. "Leave her alone. Take me." The blue candle paused. Its flame seemed to flicker, almost thoughtfully. Then it moved, bypassing Eli, and stopped directly in front of Nora. Eli's face crumpled in despair. Nora looked up, her eyes meeting the cold blue light. A strange calmness settled over her face. "It's okay, Eli," she whispered. It's my turn." The blue flame flickered, shrank, went out. Nora vanished. The candle, unlit, sat on the floor beside a sobbing, broken Eli. Just Eli and me. The apartment felt vast, empty, and haunted by the ghosts of our friends. The candle relit. It didn't move. It just sat there, its blue flame burning steadily as if waiting. Eli looked at me, his eyes hollow. It's waiting for one of us to be next. Or, I said, a desperate, insane idea forming in my mind. Maybe it needs a choice. The candle was a vessel, Rami had said, tethered to our life force. What if it wasn't just about taking? What if it was about offering? I looked at the candle, then at Eli. The fear was still there, a cold serpent coiling in my gut. But something else was stirring, a reckless, desperate resolve. "The seance," I said slowly. 7 candles, 7 people. It needs completion. Eli stared at me, uncomprehending. If one of us, willingly, breaks the circle? I didn't know if it made sense. It was a wild guess, born of terror and a refusal to simply wait for the inevitable. The blue flame seemed to pulse as if listening. "Leo, what are you saying?" Eli whispered. I took a deep breath. "It's either you or me, Eli, and I think I started this by being a skeptic. Maybe I need to finish it." I walked towards the candle. Eli tried to stop me, but I pushed him gently away. I knelt before the blue flame, felt cold, impossibly cold. I could feel it leaching the warmth from my skin, from my very soul. "I offer myself," I whispered, the words feeling alien on my tongue, "to complete the circle, to end this." The blue flame flared, brighter than ever. For a single, blinding instant, it engulfed my vision. I felt an icy grip, a pulling sensation as if I were being drawn into the heart of a frozen star. And then darkness, a different kind of darkness. Not the absence of light, but nothingness. For how long, I don't know. Then a flicker. I opened my eyes. I was lying on the floor of Nora's attic. The room was empty. The sun was streaming through the dusty windows. The 7 candles stood on the table. All of them are unlit, white, ordinary. I was alone. Eli, Nora, Rami, Diane, Saul, Tad, gone. All of them. Or were they? I stumbled to my feet, my body aching, my mind reeling. Had it been a dream? A shared hallucination? But the emptiness of the apartment was real. The lingering scent of fear was real. The cold knot in my stomach was real. I looked at the seventh candle. It was just a candle, a cheap white candle. But as I stared at it, I thought I saw, for the briefest of moments, a faint, almost imperceptible blue tinge to the unlit wick. And I knew the circle was complete. The entity was satisfied, for now. But the seventh candle remained, a silent reminder, a dormant vessel. And somewhere, in the nothingness, I knew my friends were waiting. And one day, perhaps, someone else would light 7 candles, curious about the unseen. And the seventh flame would turn blue again, buried in the snow. The first flakes had been a novelty, a picturesque dusting on the pines as our aging SUV rumbled along the remote mountain pass. Zoe, ever the optimist, had even started a carpool karaoke session. Lucas, buried in a book about ancient cryptids, grumbled good-naturedly. Dana, meticulously checking our ski gear for the 10th time, hummed along. Trent, our designated driver and self-proclaimed wilderness expert, just focused on the winding road. Camille, quiet and observant as always, sketched the snow-laden trees in her notebook. And Oscar, the group's boisterous comedian, was already planning his epic snowball fight strategy. Me, Maya, I was just looking forward to a week of pristine slopes and cozy evenings by a fire. Then the novelty wore off, and the picturesque dusting became a blinding, suffocating whiteout. The blizzard hit with the ferocity of a cornered beast. Visibility dropped to 0. The wind howled like a banshee, rocking the SUV. Trent, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, fought to keep us on what he hoped was still the road. Then came the sickening lurch, the crunch of metal, and the abrupt, jarring stop. We were off the road, nose deep into a snowdrift, the engine sputtering and dying. Silence descended, broken only by the relentless roar of the wind and Oscar's shaky. Well, this isn't ideal. Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at us. Cell service was a distant memory. The emergency kit Trent had so confidently packed suddenly seemed pitifully inadequate against the sheer, overwhelming power of the storm. Okay, Trent said, his voice strained but trying for authority. Nobody panic. We stay in the car as long as we can. The shelter. We have some supplies. Hours passed. The car grew colder. The wind shrieked, a malevolent entity trying to claw its way in. We huddled together for warmth, our earlier cheerfulness replaced by a gnawing anxiety. Dana, ever practical, rationed out the emergency chocolate. Lucas, surprisingly, started quoting survival manuals. By what we guessed was late afternoon, the snow was piling high against the windows, threatening to entomb us. The temperature inside the car was plummeting. "We can't stay here," Camille said, her voice barely a whisper, her breath fogging in the frigid air. "We'll freeze." Trent nodded grimly. "She's right. We need to find better shelter. Or make it." He remembered seeing a small, rocky outcrop a little way back before the worst of the storm hit. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but better than slowly freezing to death. Bundled in every layer we had, armed with a single, flickering flashlight and a small shovel from the emergency kit, we ventured out into the howling maelstrom. The wind tore at us, stinging our faces with ice. The snow was waist-deep in places, each step an agonizing effort. It was Lucas, surprisingly strong beneath his bookish exterior, who took the lead with the shovel, battling the drifts. It felt like an eternity, but we found it a shallow overhang, barely a cave, but offering some protection from the direct assault of the wind. We worked like maniacs, digging, clearing, using branches, and packing snow to build up a crude wall. It wasn't much, but it was something. We crawled inside, exhausted, cold, but alive. The blizzard raged for what felt like days. We huddled together, rationing our meager supplies, our conversations dwindling to hushed murmurs. The world outside was a white, roaring chaos. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. An eerie silence descended, broken only by the drip of melting snow. We crawled out of our makeshift shelter, blinking against the dazzling, untouched expanse of white under a clear, brittle sky. The landscape was transformed, alien, beautiful, and terrifyingly isolating. "We made it," Zoe breathed, a fragile smile on her face. Oscar even managed a weak joke about needing a much bigger shovel to dig out the car. But the relief was short-lived. It was Dana who noticed it first. She climbed a small rise to try and get her bearings, to see if any landmarks were visible. She came scrambling back, her face pale, her eyes wide with a terror that chilled me more than the lingering cold. "Tracks," she choked out, pointing. "Big ones. And not like anything I've ever seen." We followed her. There, pressed deep into the pristine snow, were footprints. Massive, three-toed prints, longer than my forearm, with deep claw marks gouging the frozen surface. They were fresh, and they led directly towards our makeshift shelter. "What the hell made those?" Trent whispered, his bravado gone. Lucas, his cryptid book forgotten, was staring at the tracks, his face a mixture of academic fascination and primal fear. "They're not bear, not wolf." The stride, "It's huge." A low growl echoed from the trees at the edge of the clearing, a sound that vibrated in our chests, guttural and filled with a hunger that was almost palpable. We scrambled back to our shelter, a new, visceral fear gripping us. The silence of the post-blizzard world was no longer peaceful. It was pregnant, watchful. Whatever had made those tracks knew we were here. As dusk began to settle, painting the snow in shades of bruised purple and gray, it came. We didn't see it at first, just a rustling in the dense pines, a heavy, deliberate tread that crunched in the snow. Then, a shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom, resolving into a horrifying reality. It was huge, easily 9 feet tall, even hunched over. Its fur was a matted, dirty white, blending almost perfectly with the snow. Its limbs were long and powerful, tipped with those same vicious claws. But it was the head that froze my blood. It was vaguely canine, but distorted, with a long, narrow snout filled with rows of needle-sharp teeth, and eyes that glowed with a faint, internal luminescence, like embers in the dying light. It was a creature born of nightmares and frozen wastes. It let out another growl, a low rumble of anticipation, its gaze fixed on our pathetic shelter. Oscar, despite his terror, tried to be the hero. He grabbed the shovel, our only real weapon, and stepped forward. "Get back, you overgrown snow poodle," he yelled, his voice cracking. The beast lunged. It was impossibly fast for its size. One moment Oscar was there, shovel raised. The next, he was gone. A strangled scream cut short as the creature's massive jaws closed around him. There was a sickening crunch of bone, a spray of crimson against the pristine snow. The beast shook its head once, violently, then tossed Oscar's mangled form aside like a broken doll. Camille screamed, a raw, piercing sound. Zoe covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. The beast sniffed the air, its glowing eyes fixing on us. Took a step closer. Trent, his face ashen but resolute, pushed us back. "Run! Get to the trees! Scatter!" We didn't need to tell twice. We scrambled out of the shelter, slipping and sliding in the snow, terror lending us a desperate speed. I looked back once. Trent was standing his ground, a flimsy branch in his hand, trying to distract the beast. The creature swatted him aside with a contemptuous flick of its massive paw. Trent hit a tree with a sickening thud and crumpled. I didn't see if he moved again. We ran blindly deeper into the woods. The trees offered little cover. The beast was built for this terrain. We could hear it crashing through the undergrowth behind us, its guttural roars echoing through the silent forest. Zoe stumbled, her ankle twisting. Lucas, despite his fear, helped her up. Dana, always the pragmatic one, was trying to find a defensible position, her eyes scanning the terrain. Camille was just running, tears streaming down her face, her earlier quietness replaced by a panicked, whimpering terror. We found a dense thicket of pines, their low-hanging branches offering a semblance of concealment. We huddled together, listening to the beast's progress. It was circling, sniffing, its heavy breaths audible even from a distance. "We can't just wait here for it," Dana whispered, her voice tight. "It'll find us." "What can we do?" Lucas asked, his voice hoarse. "We have nothing." The beast roared closer now. It had picked up our scent. Suddenly, Camille, who had been rocking back and forth, muttering to herself, stopped. Her eyes, usually so soft, hardened with a desperate resolve. She fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a small, disposable lighter and the tattered remains of her sketchbook. "Fire," she whispered. "It's our only chance. Distraction." It was a slim hope, but it was all we had. She began tearing pages from her sketchbook, piling them up. The lighter flickered, struggled in the cold, damp air, then caught. A small flame blossomed, quickly spreading to the dry paper. The beast crashed through the trees on the edge of our thicket, its glowing eyes fixing on us. It let out a triumphant snarl. "Now!" Camille cried, shoving the burning papers towards a pile of dry pine needles at the base of a large, dead tree. The needles caught, smoldered, and then erupted into flame. The fire spread with astonishing speed, climbing the dead tree and casting a flickering, orange glow on the snow. The beast recoiled, letting out a hiss of what sounded like surprise, or perhaps pain. It pawed at the ground, its glowing eyes narrowed, focused on the rapidly growing fire. "Go! Go now!" Dana yelled, pushing us. We scrambled away, using the beast's momentary distraction to put distance between us. The fire roared, a beacon of desperate hope in the encroaching darkness. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs ached. The sounds of the beast faded behind us, replaced by the crackle of the fire. We didn't know if it was following, if the fire had truly deterred it, or merely delayed it. We found a small, abandoned hunter's blind, little more than a few rotting planks nailed between two trees, but it was covered. We huddled inside, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the lingering terror. Hours passed in a state of hypervigilance. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of wind, sent our hearts leaping into our throats. As the first pale light of dawn began to filter through the trees, Lucas, who had been keeping watch, let out a shaky breath. I don't think it's coming." We dared to hope. Slowly, cautiously, we emerged. The forest was silent, save for the distant chirping of a brave bird. There were no fresh tracks, no guttural roars. The fire Camille had started had burned itself out, leaving a blackened scar on the landscape. We were alive. Zoe, Lucas, Dana, Camille, and me. 5 of us. Oscar and Trent were gone sacrifices to the frozen fury of the mountains. We started walking, following the faint hope of a downward slope, praying it would lead us back to civilization. Every shadow seemed to hide the beast, every patch of undisturbed snow a fresh canvas for its horrifying tracks. We didn't talk about what we had seen. The reality was too monstrous, too raw. But it was there, in our haunted eyes, in the way we flinched at every sound. Days later, hypothermic, frostbitten, and half-starved, a rescue team found us. Our story was met with disbelief, attributed to trauma and exposure. A wild animal, they said, a bear perhaps driven mad by hunger. But we knew what those tracks meant. We knew the glowing eyes, the guttural roars, the impossible speed and savagery. The mountains hold secrets, ancient and terrible. We had stumbled into one, a place where nightmares walked in the snow. Sometimes, when the wind howls on a cold winter night, I still hear it, that guttural roar, the crunch of snow under massive paws. And I know, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, that the beast is still out there, buried in the snow, waiting for the next storm, the next stranded souls. And it's still hungry. And there we vanish, into the static of the storm. If you're still here, congratulations. You've survived this chapter of the night. But the void is patient. Ring the bell so the next horror never catches you unprepared. Tell us below, which story clawed deepest into your fears? Share this video with someone who claims they've seen it all. Then watch their bravado unravel. Until our next haunting, keep one eye on the shadows. The rain remembers your name,